The events that follow are known chiefly from the writings of Herodotus of Halicarnassus, an ancient Greek colony on what's now the west coast of Turkey. About 30 years after the Persian invasion, Herodotus began his Historiae, his inquiries into its origins and course. Like most people in the ancient world, he believed in omens, oracles, and divine intervention. But he also believed that humans could shape their own fate. So he travelled across Greece and the Persian Empire, reading records and inscriptions, speaking to local people, and weighing up the evidence according to his own reason. The Roman writer Cicero would later dub Herodotus the father of history. War is the father and king of all. Some he has made gods, and some men, some slaves, and some free. The root of the conflict between Greece and Persia went back a generation. In the 6th century BC, King Cyrus the Great brought the Greek colonies of western Anatolia under Persian rule. But in 499 they rebelled and appealed to their fellow Greeks for aid. Only Athens and Eretria answered the call. Together the Greeks burned the provincial capital Sardis and its temple to the earth goddess Cybele. It seemed like a major victory, but the Persians responded with impressive speed, and the Greeks were soon in full retreat, back to the coast. It took the Persians 4 years to finally stamp out the revolt in western Anatolia. Then the great king Darius turned his attention to the Greeks across the sea, who dared to aid the rebels. He sent ambassadors to the many city-states of Greece, demanding earth and water as tokens of submission. Many submitted, but 2 did not. Athens, a young democracy fiercely protective of its liberty, and Sparta, a conservative, militarized state that took orders from no one. Both cities answered the great king by kicking his envoys down a well, where they were told they might find all the earth and water they required. In 490 BC, Darius dispatched a mighty expedition to bring the Greeks to heel. Naxos was the largest of several islands to submit. Eretria was sacked and burned. Then the Persians landed at Marathon to mete out the same punishment to Athens. Athenian troops, with those of their small neighbour Plataea, met them on the beach. Though outnumbered 2 to 1, the Greek soldiers attacked. Their hoplite infantry fought with large, heavy shields and spears in a tight phalanx formation. The more lightly equipped Persians could not stand up to their onslaught. Persian troops were slaughtered on the beach. The survivors scrambled back to their ships. Athens had been saved. 4 years later, Darius died and was succeeded by his son Xerxes. He now took up the task of punishing the Greeks and avenging his father's humiliation. The new King of Kings summoned troops and ships from across his empire and ordered a bridge of boats to be built across the Hellespont. In spring 480 BC, his gigantic invasion force crossed from Asia into Europe. Herodotus estimated its size at 2.3 million men, an impossible number that could not have been fed or watered. Modern historians think 200,000 more likely, still vast for the age. It was accompanied by an enormous fleet, 1,000 warships or more, supplied by Persia's vassal states across the eastern Mediterranean. Greece appeared an easy target. Its many independent city-states were notorious for constant infighting. But in the face of the Persian threat, 31 states put aside their differences and convened a council of war at the Isthmus of Corinth to plan the defense of Greece. These states were later commemorated on a giant serpent column at Delphi, the Greeks' most sacred site. At the top of the list, the Lacedaemonians, another name for the Spartans, followed by the Athenians and Corinthians. Knowing the Persians would invade from the north, the Greeks sent 10,000 men to hold a mountain pass at Tempe, near Mount Olympus. But when the troops arrived, they found the position could be easily outflanked. Nor were they confident about the loyalty of Thessaly to their rear. So the troops withdrew. Instead, the Greeks would make their stand at Thermopylae, with 7,000 men led by the Spartan king Leonidas. The Greek fleet arrived at Artemisium to guard the sea flank. Like the alliance itself, the Greek fleet was an uneasy coalition, with ships from city-states like Athens and Aegina that had until recently been at war. The Athenian contingent was by far the largest. It only existed thanks to the discovery 3 years earlier of rich silver mines at Laurium. It had taken the foresight of Themistocles, an Athenian statesman and general, to persuade the people of Athens not to spend this windfall on cash handouts for themselves. Instead, he'd urged them to spend the money on a fleet of 200 triremes for their own future security. It was a decision that may ultimately have saved Greece. Athens, however, was so distrusted by other Greeks that they refused to serve under an Athenian admiral. So Themistocles tactfully accepted the appointment of a Spartan, Eurybiades, to lead the fleet, even though Spartans had no expertise in naval warfare. Spray flying from the oars, the fleets sweep together, ploughing through the swell, ram teeth bared. Both the Greek and Persian fleets relied on a single type of warship, one that dominated naval warfare in the Mediterranean, the trireme. Sleek, agile and delicate, the trireme carried masts and sails for cruising. But in combat, these were lowered, and the ship relied on 3 banks of rowers, which gave the trireme its name. The ship carried 170 oarsmen in total, who could produce a top speed of around 10 knots, to smash their primary weapon, a bronze-sheathed ram, into the hull of an enemy ship, leaving it crippled. Boarding the enemy was another tactic. A Greek ship usually carried 14 marines, 10 hoplites armed with spear and shield, and 4 archers. The ship's commander, the triarch, sat at the stern, alongside the helmsman, the kybernetes, who guided the ship's course with twin rudders. A boatswain and bow officer relayed orders to the oarsmen, while a piper helped them keep time. A carpenter and 10 sailors brought the ship's total complement to 200 men. Every ship had a name, and a painted eye on the bow to avert ill fortune. Herodotus describes the Greek ships as more heavily built than the Persian ships, although in what way, we're not sure. He also tells us that Persian ships carried many more marines, 44 in total. Here, the sons of Athens set in place the bright foundation stone of freedom. While Leonidas and the Greeks held the pass at Thermopylae, the Persian fleet sailed south along the rugged coastline of Magnesia. But one night while at anchor, they were hit by a violent storm. Hundreds of ships were wrecked and damaged. Thousands of sailors drowned. According to Herodotus, the Persians further weakened their force by sending 200 triremes around the island of Euboea to cut off the Greek retreat. But the entire squadron was destroyed by another storm. Herodotus offers little supporting evidence for this operation, which would have been extremely reckless, and some historians doubt it ever happened. Despite Persian losses, the Greeks still faced odds of nearly 3-1 at Artemisium. And they weren't just outnumbered. The Persian fleet was more experienced in naval warfare, particularly the elite squadron from Phoenicia in modern Lebanon. Nevertheless, over 3 days of tense naval combat, the Greek fleet held its nerve and kept the Persians at bay. But at the end of the third day, disastrous news arrived. Leonidas and the Greeks at Thermopylae had been encircled. The Spartan king and half his men had been killed. The pass had fallen. It seemed the efforts of the Greek fleet had been in vain. Central Greece and Athens itself now lay open to the Persian onslaught. As the Greek fleet withdrew, the Persians marched south, burning cities, farms and sanctuaries, though sparing Thebes, one of several Greek city-states to side with Persia. To Athenian dismay, the Greek army, dominated by troops from the Peloponnese, gathered at the Isthmus of Corinth and began building a great wall to protect their own homes from the invader. Athens was to be abandoned. The Greek fleet began to evacuate civilians to Troezen, Aegina and Salamis. Pallas Athena cannot appease Olympian Zeus, but the wooden wall alone, the wooden wall shall stand. In the months before the Persian invasion, the Athenians had sent a delegation to the Greeks' holiest shrine, the Oracle of Delphi, seeking guidance for the upcoming war. They'd received only a terrifying warning. "Why are you sitting there, you fools? Flee, flee to the ends of the earth." But a second oracle offered the Athenians a sliver of hope. Athens could trust in its wooden wall. A few Athenians thought the oracle referred to a thorn hedge that had once enclosed the city's Acropolis, its citadel, so they fortified themselves there. But when the Persians arrived, they were surrounded and slaughtered. Xerxes then burned Athens and its temples to avenge the destruction of Sardis 18 years before. Themistocles argued that Athens' wooden wall was her new fleet. But as Greek naval commanders met at Salamis in mid-September, the situation looked grim. A king of Sparta was dead, Athens was burning, the Greek alliance was on the brink of collapse. Themistocles was desperate to stop the Peloponnesian ships retreating to the isthmus. He warned them that the enemy's greater numbers and faster ships meant the Greeks would be defeated if they fought on the open sea. But in the narrow straits of Salamis, with less room to maneuver, the Persians wouldn't be able to exploit their greater numbers, and the heavier Greek ships had the advantage. Themistocles even warned the other Greeks that if they retreated now, the Athenian ships would quit the alliance and sail to Italy. So the fleet commander Eurybiades accepted Themistocles' plan. But Themistocles worried that the Peloponnesians would change their minds. Secretly, he ordered a trusted servant to go to the Persian camp, to tell Xerxes that the Greeks were in a state of terror and would flee at first light. Just 8 miles away at Phaleron, the great king sought the counsel of his generals and admirals. All advised him to attack the Greeks immediately, to win the final victory that would end the war. All except Queen Artemisia of Halicarnassus, commanding 5 ships from Caria. Why risk battle, she argued, when the great king had only to threaten southern Greece by land or sea, and the Peloponnesians would rush home to defend their land, and the Greek alliance would split. Then victory was certain. But Xerxes sought the glory of battle, and was confident of an easy victory. Then Themistocles' messenger arrived, telling the king exactly what he wanted to hear. The Greeks were terrified and preparing to flee. He must strike immediately. Xerxes ordered the Persian fleet to sea that night, so they would be in position to annihilate the Greeks as they tried to escape at dawn. Meanwhile, at the Greek camp, an Athenian named Aristides arrived with sacred relics from Aegina to inspire the fleet. He also brought news that the enemy had put to sea and blocked the straits. Themistocles' ruse had worked. Retreat was no longer an option. The Greeks would have to fight at Salamis. O divine Salamis, you will be the death of mothers' sons. The earliest surviving accounts of the battle that followed, by Herodotus and the Athenian playwright Aeschylus, are sometimes vague and allow different interpretations, but they are detailed enough to allow us to reconstruct the most likely course of events. The Persian fleet put to sea at night, around 600 triremes, outnumbering the Greeks 3-2. Expecting hard fighting at the entrance to the strait, they landed 400 soldiers on the tiny island of Psytalia. Their role was to finish off any shipwrecked Greeks who made it to shore. Then, keeping close to the mainland, the Persian fleet silently advanced into the narrow strait, the elite Phoenicians leading the way. According to a later Greek historian, Diodorus Siculus, the Persians also sent an Egyptian squadron around Salamis to cut off any Greek escape into the Gulf of Megara. But this event is not mentioned in earlier sources, and may be an invention. At dawn, Xerxes arrived at an observation post overlooking the strait. The great king was confident that his presence would inspire his captains to fight with more determination than they'd shown at Artemisium a few weeks before. He was accompanied by scribes, ready to note down the names of captains who fought well, and those who did not.